Hi, you're listening to Cultivate Curiosity, a podcast that inspires the next generation to stay curious.
Cultivate Curiosity is brought to you by the Emerald Coast Science Center, a nonprofit interactive science museum in Fort Walton Beach, Florida.
This podcast is for anyone curious about the world around them, because you never know what we'll talk about next.
Hey everyone, my name is Eileen. I'm the social media coordinator here at the Emerald Coast Science Center and your host of Cultivate Curiosity. I'm really glad you guys are here today. Today's episode is a really special one because we're talking about something that matters, not just in science, but in our world as a whole. So March is Women's History Month, and March 8th was actually International Women's Day. And while these moments are about celebrating the incredible women who have shaped science, they're also about something bigger. They're about making sure that the next generation of women feel like they belong in these spaces too. Because the reality is, while women have made a huge contribution to science, they're still underrepresented in many STEM fields today. Women make up about 35% of the STEM workforce globally, and even less in certain areas like engineering and technology. And that's not because girls aren't capable. It's often because they're not always encouraged, supported, or shown that they belong. And that's something that we can change. So today, I'm joined by two amazing women who are not only leaders here at the Science Center, but who are actively helping shape the future for young girls in STEM.
Hi, it's Diane. I'm the executive director here at the Emerald Coast Science Center.
Hi, I'm Harley. I'm the education coordinator and exhibit curator here at the Science Center. And today we're going to talk about why representation matters, why it's important to act now, not later, and how we can all play a role in inspiring the next generation of women in science.
All right, so I first want to start with something big picture. So we talk a lot about encouraging girls in STEM, but why do you guys think it's so important that we're doing this now? Why can't this just be something that changes over time?
I don't think that we have any time to waste in making sure that we implement changes, that women are important to STEM and that young girls have a role in STEM moving forward. I actually feel like what we're seeing is a clawback. I feel like there's less support this year than there has been in previous years to reach those underrepresented groups. And this is coming mostly from the federal government. And we even saw this in a program that we do, that we lost several big funders on our Women in Science program because it had the word women in it. And if we aren't intentional about reaching out to these audiences, they're not going to get the support that they need to become active in these science disciplines, because the system is built around not supporting them. And so you have to be intentional, and we have to push back against the way the system is already implemented.
I think too, so much about pushing back against that system, and so much of how we go through our lives is learning new things and adapting to those things, and how we can take what we now know and the knowledge we have learned and advocating for the things that are important. So you and all of us know how important it is for women in science, and hopefully some of the people listening also know how important it is. But a lot of young girls are not thinking about that. So for them, the now could be when they are 8. But if nobody is there advocating for them and telling them how important it is for women in science, they might not have that now until 20 years later. So now is kind of a relative. When you learn it is when you should be focusing on it.
All right, so I also want to make things a little bit more personal for you guys. Supporting girls in STEM is important for the Science Center. It's important for everybody that works here, but specifically to you, why is it important to support these girls in STEM?
Mm-hmm. There's so many reasons why. I think it's important to have an equitable playing field for everybody. So not even just for girls in STEM, but for every individual across the board. And I think when you start to focus on breaking the barriers for advocating for more women in STEM, you also then start to break more barriers for advocating and for people of color or for people with different learning disabilities. And it opens it up for everybody to recognize where there are less representation in the science STEM field.
So I have a story from my career, early in my career, when I worked for the Food and Drug Administration, and there was opportunities to go overseas for travel to go to these pharmaceutical companies and do inspections. And as a chemist, so that was open to people in our office. And my colleague got to go to China. And I wanted to go to China, but it wasn't offered to a woman. And they were only going to send guys to China because they said, well, China doesn't respect, at this time, they said, well, they're not going to respect a woman that's going to come in here and do this inspection. And so that's why we don't send women. Well, that's a self-perpetuating cycle, right? Because if you never send a woman and they never anticipating seeing a woman in that position, they're never going to respect women in that position. And it was just so frustrating to me because we were perpetuating that system. There was nobody that was saying, well, you know what, that's just wrong. And we have to be the person that stands up and says, okay, if we don't make that change, then nothing changes. We're just feeding into that stereotype and we're just feeding into that misconception. And so that's why I've always felt very strongly about making sure that we say, everybody's capable of this. We're very adamant when we talk to kids about, being a scientist, that you don't have to go to a big fancy school. You don't have to have a big fancy degree. You have to ask a question. You have to make observation. You have to record your data. So if you think about the story of Jane Goodall, and she had no scientific background when she started out. She went into the field. She was a note taker. She made observations. She recorded them. It wasn't until much later that she went back to school and got her big degrees. So anybody can be a scientist. And I think that we're not talking about it to children, to young students in the right frame. And they always see, oh, it's going to be so hard. It's going to be so hard. I have to have organic chemistry, or I have to memorize certain reactions or things like that. It's not like that at all. You find something that you are passionate about, find something that you want to learn more about, find something that makes you go, I never thought of it that way. And then chase that. Mm-hmm. And that's all you really have to do.
And if you typically are going after things that you enjoy and love doing and have a passion for, it's not going to feel hard.
Right, because it's something you want to be doing, and you would spend your time doing that anyway, which is why I always used to say, like, you go to your undergraduate degree, you have to take all of these, like, classes that are very broad to get your foundational education. But by the time you get into graduate school, you should be focusing in on that specific thing, the one that you're really interested in. And so in some cases, it's more exciting, it's more fun, it's not as much work as getting that initial degree is, because you're actually doing the thing you want to do.
But doing anything new is hard, I feel. Even a little bit. It's a little bit hard, but it's always really rewarding. A lot of these scientists and these women and even just people that have made a difference in the world all started with the same thing, like you just said, asking a question. And I think one of the most powerful things we can do is highlight these women who came before us who have made those difference, like you just mentioned, Jane Goodall. So I'd like to ask each of you, who is a woman in science that inspires you the most and why?
I would like to add something, that Jane Goodall Day is April 3rd. So on that day, make sure you go out and celebrate her. She is definitely somebody that I look up to for sure. Whenever I was in college at the University of Florida, I actually got to go and see her speak. She came on campus and did a presentation about everything that she's done in her life. She's so soft and so sweet and so well spoken. And when I tell you, I've never been into a room so silent and so like attentive. Every single person was like sitting there so quiet, so ready to listen, and occasionally you would hear like a little sniffle or a little tear, because she genuinely is just so inspiring for everything that she's done. I also love Sylvia Earle. She is an advocate for the ocean, the blue. She has so many documentaries on the fishing industry and how that's affecting sea life. She is truly inspiring.
I've always been a big fan of Rosalind Franklin. You know, it was her X-ray crystallography work that helped to discover the structure of DNA. And, you know, the Nobel Prize was given to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. And when they had gotten around to the time to give out the Nobel Prize, she had already passed away from cancer. And she was only like 37 years old when she died. And part of that was because of the X-ray crystallography work that she did and exposure to that. But then also her work was shared by her lab partner without her permission. And then Watson and Crick then went and built the molecular model, but had they not seen her work, they wouldn't have had that aha moment. And then they talked so brutally about her later on and tried to dismiss the importance of the work that she had done. And so I just feel like she's finally coming into her own now. I think people are finally recognizing the work that she did and how important that it was, and understanding that the way that she was portrayed at the time was portrayed by these men, and there were reasons why she was the way she was, and it's because she was a single woman in this field of men, and like she wasn't even allowed in the lounge because it was like male only. I mean, just the way that she was treated. So I am so happy to see that she is finally getting the recognition that she deserves.
And I think that sort of like makes me think about what we were talking about earlier, like why now? Why is it something we need to focus on now? And it's like, do we want to go back to that? Do we want to go back to the spaces being divided like that? I don't. I don't think this world would let it. Eileen, what about you?
My favorite scientist is Temple Grandin, mainly because she did a lot of things. She was an animal behaviorist, but she also was autistic, which means that she saw the world a little bit differently. She saw patterns that maybe other people didn't see. She saw a lot of things through a different lens, I would say. And she actually used that work to help animals. Cattle specifically, they get stressed out too. They get overstimulated. They experience a lot of the same emotions that humans do. And she realized that if we don't do something with our livestock, with animals, how are we ever going to understand humans and the way that they think and the way that they react and the way that they show their emotions? So basically, she created a way to help cattle during livestock processes to help them not be so stressed while they were either grooming or, any kind of maintenance. So I think that's really awesome, mostly because she was one of the scientists that was recognized with her autism, and that wasn't just kind of put aside. And I think that was really cool that they decided to honor the fact that she thought differently and not
Dismiss it.
I feel like because we didn't understand what autism is until recently, I think that a lot of the great scientists and a lot of the great thinkers in the past would have been categorized as being somewhere on the spectrum.
Oh, absolutely.
That they might not have been able to make those great leaps and bounds and see the things that only they could see. Nobody else could see, simply because they thought differently and they looked at the world differently than those people around them. And so I think that just we didn't have that designation.
Right.
But I think that if we look back and actually look at the lives of these people, we could say absolutely, because how did they make that spark? How did they find that one thing that everybody else looked at it, and they looked at it so differently and were able to see beyond what everyone else couldn't see? And it's because they had those special skills.
But if it would have been acknowledged, then how would those people have been treated?
Exactly. I feel like Temple Grandin, she was one of the first to like wear it loud and proud,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't affect her ability. Besides, all the challenges that she probably faced being a woman in science, it didn't hinder her at all, which it was great, because for a long time, autism wasn't, like you said, widely known, talked about, and so how are you supposed to recognize it?
Well, I think that too, that focus, that intense focus that sometimes comes with, autism is what allows great things to be developed. Mm-hmm. Because just, some of us our little squirrel brains would, not stick to a thought or an idea, not to see it to completion. And so we'd give up too easily.
Right.
And move on to something else. But I think that ability to focus is huge in scientific endeavors.
if there is a young girl sitting in this room right now listening, someone who's really curious, who wants to make a difference, but isn't really exactly sure where to start, what would you say to her?
So look at it like this. What would you tell your younger self?
Yes.
Yeah, younger self, and what was my age? Younger self. Because younger self, Harley, in middle school, I would have said, stop thinking about everybody else and do what you want to do. When I was little, like probably like elementary school, I would tell myself to like stay in the mud, stay in the dirt, and dig and keep looking for stuff. Encourage them that what they're doing, if they're doing anything that would spark their curiosity and spark their interest, to encourage them to keep doing that, even if it means that they're going to get a little messy or it's going to cause a little bit of time to do something. Because think sometimes in this like day and age, we're so caught up in like doing the next thing immediately and don't think about that everybody is living this life for the first time. And like, especially little kids, this is their life and they have so much ahead of them. And if they want to dig in the dirt and dig in the mud and pull up all the little creepy crawlies for hours, we should encourage them to do that, because that's something they're genuinely enjoying and like having a good time, and taking someone's like joy and interest from that just because they're going to get dirty doesn't feel right to me.
Well, I think too that we always talk about like it's in middle school where we lose girls in science. We lose a lot of kids in science in middle school, but girls especially, because there's so much pressure to conform. There's so much pressure to look a certain way, to be a certain way. And I think sometimes now social media has even made it even worse, as that conformity. Everybody dresses the same. Everybody has the same hair, the makeup, all of those types of things. And inside of that conformity, you lose the curiosity. And because you quit thinking as an individual and you kind of start getting this groupthink mentality so that you can fit right in. Never be afraid to be you, because you're the only you that will ever exist. And the world needs you to be fully you and uniquely you. And yeah, middle school's, it's the worst. It is. I had a friend who was a middle school principal, and he once said, there's nothing meaner in the world than an 8th grade girl. Mm-hmm. Well, and again,
But why? Why are they mean?
I think it's
what are they having to conform to?
Exactly.
To meet societal standards
exactly.
based off of not women.
Especially all while watching boys just get to do the same exact things and they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, so there's this like expectations on them that all of a sudden they have to give up the things that they thought were interesting up until this point and then become this other person. And so they're uncomfortable in their own skin. Mm-hmm. And then there's all of this other pressure on them to be pretty, to be this, to be nice, to be, and that just kind of makes them frustrated, I think.
So instead of them having somebody to talk to and understand why they're feeling that way, they're just bombarded with boys will be boys, smile, act this way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, of course we're going to be mean.
Mm-hmm. I think it's okay to be mean as long as you're smart. So obviously women issues and inspiring women and young girls is something we're really passionate about at the Science Center. We actually have a few programs specifically we mentioned a little bit earlier designed to support and inspire young girls in STEM. One of those is our GEMS program. Harley, do you want to tell everybody about our GEMS?
Yeah, so GEMS does not have anything to do with rocks and minerals. First off, we'll get that out there, because anytime I ever say that, or any of us ever say it, it's like, oh, we're only focusing on rocks and minerals. No, we are not.
But rocks and minerals are cool.
Yes, we may have that tossed in there as well. GEMS stands for Girls Empowered with Math and Science. It's a program I believe we have been doing since 2020. At least that's what we have documented in our drive is since 2020. And with the GEMS program, we feature a female scientist each month. We introduce the girls to that female scientist, and then we also do activities based off of that scientist. When we first started it, I believe we started it here at the Science Center, maybe for like a year or two. And then we ended up actually maybe like in 2022 or 2023 partnering with the Fort Walton Beach Library. We love them. And it was also sponsored by MTSI. And they allowed us to offer that programming for free at the Fort Walton Beach Library. The Fort Walton Beach Library gets all of the logistics together. They get all the girls signed up, and then our educators will go in and teach based off of the female scientist. And ever since we have started it, we have never repeated a female scientist. There has been a new female scientist featured for the past 6 years, and we do, I think, 10 months, 11 months, and we're never going to run out of options. Never going to run out of female scientists to talk about. If anybody ever has any female scientists they would love for us to talk about, please let us know. We would love to see if we've already done her or, potentially put her into the next set that we do our GEMS topics. It's an amazing program. Sometimes we will also include our animals in the program as well. We have a lot of animals here at the Science Center, and we name all of them after scientists or scientific discoveries. And if we can tie in the animal to the scientist we're talking about, for them to also understand the correlation and why it's important for us to know, we will bring that animal in as well. And most of the times the girls will love it. The GEMS program is also targeted for that upper elementary, middle school age range girls, which, like Diane said, is typically where we start to lose girls' interest in science. Or if they're not already interested in science by that age, the likelihood of them continuing to be interested in science really declines. So GEMS is great.
GEMS was one of my very first teaching experiences, and I've always loved that program. We also have an annual conference that we hold every year, and this upcoming one is our 10th year.
10th? Yeah, so that's our Women in Science, and we are getting ready to celebrate our 10th anniversary, and there's a couple reasons we do this program. It's a 2-hour event. It's on a Tuesday night in September, and we invite local women with STEM-related careers, and we're really trying to do a couple of things. Number one, we want to show students in our area the type of STEM-related careers that are here. I feel like a lot of times kids think that they need to get up and go away. Because of the military base, there are so many incredible STEM-related careers right here that pay very well. And so you can still live here. You can still go to the beach on the weekends, and you can have a great job, a great career in our area. You don't have to leave for that. And so that's relevant to all students, male and female. But we also want to show women in these career fields so that they can inspire these young women, these girls, and sort of share with them what their journey looked like, why they do the work that they do, what makes them excited about getting up and continuing day in and day out. We also want young men and boys to see women in these career fields so that they can anticipate working alongside a female engineer or having a female as a boss in this career field, which they automatically typically think is male dominated. And so if we don't show women doing that work, you can't be what you can't see. And so we need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to see these women and hear about the kind of incredible discoveries that are being made here in our community. We participate in a program called the If Then program and also the NGCP program, which is kind of those two organizations sort of wrap up together. And these are programs that are trying to support girls in STEM-related careers. So there's a lot of opportunities. They have lesson plans written. They have female mentors that you can reach out to. They also gather a lot of research and data on what women in STEM looks like. And so they just had a new report come out in March of 2026. And I think some of the takeaways from that are that women constitute 48% of the total workforce, but only 35% of the STEM workforce. And where we normally see women in the STEM workforce is in behavioral sciences, social sciences, and life sciences. Where those numbers get skewed to the lower end are in physical sciences, computer and mathematical sciences, and engineering. So that's where we're weakest. And then if we talk about women of color or certain ethnic groups like Latina, Black, and Native American women, they represent less than 10% of the STEM workforce overall. So we have a lot of room for growth. We have a long way to go.
Is this just in America?
Yes, yeah. These numbers from NGCP are based on America. Across all careers, women earn 81 cents for every dollar earned by a man. So we'll just put that out there. Let it just germinate there.
Think about that every night before you go to bed.
I think the thing that we forget is that diversity of thought is the thing that makes discovery happen. Because if we all continue along that same track and that same group think, we're not going to make any progress and nothing new is going to be discovered or is going to innovate or happen. The larger amount of thought diversity that we can have, and this comes from people that have lived different lives and have different life experiences that can bring different perspectives to a problem, the greater the success will be. And regardless of gender, ethnicity, learning abilities, everybody has a seat at this table and everybody has a perspective that needs to be heard. And I think that's the important thing that we need to remember. And we've got a lot of challenges and they're not going to be solved with the same type of thinking that we've been coming at them, previously. Otherwise, they'd already be solved. So.
Alrighty. Well, before we wrap up, I just want to come back to say something that we touched on earlier. Every time we encourage curiosity, every time we say you can do this, and every time we create space for someone to explore, we're helping shape that future and keep the next generation curious. Thank you both so much for being here and everything you do, not just at the Science Center, but for being role models for the young girls that are watching and listening right now. And to everyone listening, whether you're a parent, an educator, or a young person figuring out what inspires you, your curiosity matters, your voice matters, and there is space for you in science.
Until next time, keep exploring,
Keep asking questions,
And keep cultivating curiosity.
Bye.